All right, traders, welcome to today's recap. This is Christian from Hertz Tribeca Trade Group, and today is Monday, September 10th. So let's go through the indices first. I think today was ultimately kind of a little bit of a difficult day. And the reason being is because as we came in today, futures were bid. And so equity futures, meaning S&P, Nasdaq. I think Nasdaq was up about 40, 45 basis points going into the open, which is really stupid. There's no reason why. I don't know who bids up these futures pre-market. There really was no excuse for that. Asia markets continue to be way under pressure. Europe did get a bounce today, but it's why I really don't watch or don't pay attention too much to S&P futures or to what the Nasdaq is doing overnight. I really pay attention to what overnight markets are doing. I pay attention to what Asia is doing. And, that just told me that we weren't going to have, to start the day up around 0.5% in NASDAQ, up about 35 basis points in S&P. Just really wasn't going to get us anywhere because I don't think we're in the market, especially after last week, where we're just going to fly up 1% in the face of all that, overnight. So just to kind of talk about the bad first, this group is getting absolutely smoked. The Chinese internet group, they're down 3.2% and no bid whatsoever. And we've seen this a couple times before. They start down and they just continue to go down. So notice in this group of Chinese internets, they bounced up into the 20-day moving average, and since then it's been pretty much lights out, and they continue to go lower. They could be on to next stop around 42 and change the way this is going. So really taking back a lot of these gains. And, I do think people are starting to look at the relationship between this and, let's say US internets, which I know are completely different. But it seems like it's just very odd that this group is getting hit this hard. And some of these China businesses, seem like they had pretty good earnings, like BZUN. So anyway, I want to move on. That name's all the way back to the 200-day moving average and has really slid decently. So I think it's going to be interesting what happens with China tonight. So before I get ahead of myself with that, let's go ahead and look at the S&P. But again, my message there was it just didn't look like today was going to be a day that was going to have a decent range to it when we come in and start the day up like that. So we did finish green. I think the Dow finished in the red, but S&P finished in the green. The Qs actually finished right where they opened. So if you look at NASDAQ futures or if you look at the Qs, kind of building a little bit. Same thing with IWM. At one point, IWM was up 0.5%, and then it completely just gave it back. The bottom line for I think the overall averages is that, as I said in the beginning of the day in the trading room, I think it's just going to take a couple days to kind of work its way through, right? When price starts to get, and we could look at this back at the S&P, but when price starts to duck under and get, lose the upside momentum, it takes a little time, right? And you can see this, whenever we've come in and we've had one of these moves. Notice we don't just bounce right up. It takes sometimes, this took a week, right, before a big red bar, kind of a doji looking bar, and it took its time. So you have to make sure that if you're trading options that you've got enough time to kind of withstand a few days of digestion. Here it was pretty quick. There wasn't much. You had 1-2 red days, and then we just continue to go up. Here was a little bit different. We had 1, 2, 3, 4 red days, a green day, a red day, big red day, and a bounce, and then a green day, and then we put together about a week and a half of a nice move. So, just keep that in mind. We don't usually bounce after we've had a series of red days. It usually takes a little bit of kind of chilling out for a couple days, a little bit of chop, and then we often resume the uptrend. So that's the case. I would say, kind of besides me being a little bit negative in the video in the first couple of minutes, there was a lot of things that actually that I got a little bit excited about the move. A lot of growth areas continue, and I think going back to China, some things that I think are a little bit more sheltered from from what's going on with tariffs all over the place, and a little bit, some names that are out of the headlines a bit. So, for example, IGV. This is a group that I continue to talk about: the software, the application, the enterprise, the infrastructure software names. Very strong. I mean, I got long Salesforce last week. I mean, look at how it opened this morning. It opened pretty weak. Or I'm sorry, it opened here and it drifted pretty lower, but it finished on the highs of the day. So that's pretty good, I think. Another name that I'm still holding on to the last piece of, QLYS, doesn't look bad, right? So pretty good, right? Finished close to the highs of the day. Microsoft was another name that I was watching today. I don't have a position in this one, but maybe we'll look at that tomorrow. So I think some of these are starting to turn the corner. And if you look at some other areas, so it's kind of fun to go through some of this group. Look at GoDaddy, and I sent a chart out in GoDaddy and what's the other one? Wix. Last night, a couple of people really liked those charts that I sent out. But these are areas that are really not going to be affected, from what I can tell anyway, by trade tariffs. And if you go through some of the other names in here, let's see if I bring up IGV and today's movers, you're going to find a lot of strength in this group today. And I think it had 1 or 2 days where it came in. Sale was up. Fortinet, FTNT, I think Palo Alto had a nice day. And then even Palo Alto took out yesterday's high. So I had an earnings trade on, which expired on Friday that worked. I was able to get out of that one right around the open on Friday, but I did not ante up and put on a new trade. But this looks pretty strong, real strong move. And then you go back to some of the semi names, which were pretty impressive. AMD was up another 9%. A lot of call buying in there again. Also, Broadcom had a nice follow through day after earnings too. We talked about this one. I sent this one out to members. Pre-market up 3.5%. So now testing. Now it's going to have the real test, the 200-day moving average. But what a nice day trade this was, because I think it opened right around flat today, or maybe up a little bit today. And then just a couple other names in this group saw call buying. Even though I'm going to show this one looks pretty bad. MRVL finished close to the lows, but there was a lot of call buying in this one. So I'll check the open interest tomorrow. Also, they keep buying some of these lottos in AMAT, which is another name that's been pretty beaten up. So maybe a couple names to keep an eye on in Semiland. Then just to kind of go through a couple of the other areas I forgot to talk about. I think the group that got the most attention today was the hurricane plays. Generac, interesting. I think Generac really was put on people's radars last week, and it didn't do anything. The first storm that came through the Gulf was a small storm at that, which is good. This other storm that seems to be coming through is now, I think, a level 4 is what they're saying, unless that changed at the end of the day. But look at the volume in Generac. Not too much option activity in Generac, but clearly it gapped up on the open, and you could see kept going. So I would keep an eye on that name tomorrow. Also, Home Depot, continues to have some follow through. A few other names in this space. I mean, that's an all-time high now for Home Depot, and really had some momentum behind it the last couple days with a gap up there on a breakout. Lowe's was also pretty strong today. That also finished up 2.6% today. There's a few other plays if you want to look at for Hurricane, but URI was strong. This name is just getting out. Remember, URI had good earnings, and almost back to the 200-day moving average. And then I think, as you start to get more and more further away, when you come up with some of these plays. But OC, Owens Corning, was another name that was strong today. So that was that's I think very much like the hurricane. Then also retail, and it's kind of like retail tech, I guess, or consumer electronic names. If you look at the XRT ETF, this was up 1.1% today. This looks like it wants to punch out to 52-week highs, to be honest. It's got some moment. It's been digesting, but I think this thing is ready to bounce out and up. And if you go through some of these names, here's where I would guess consumer electrics, but Roku moving up. Stitch Fix continues to move higher. I keep tweeting this out. CVNA, look at this move today, up 11% today, and this thing just wants higher. If you're not familiar with this name, check it out. Google Carvana. They are a disruptor in the used car industry. Very, very nice and very powerful move. Up 11%, closing on the damn highs. Just anytime, we got a little bit of digestion last week, and I've been mentioning this name almost every day, and there it is, closed right on the highs today. A few other names that I've got written down. Yeah, Wayfair is another name. And then the healthcare and equipment names. These are starting to look interesting. ABMD was a name that I played a couple weeks back. I don't have a position on it right now. First of all, I have to put the right symbol in. ABMD. Let's bring up the daily chart. So, this is a name that has a pretty high volatility name in terms of the option implied volatility. So this may be a name that if it goes a little bit higher, of course, it's got to break above this downward trend line. But I think selling a little bit of put spreads here makes sense. I do think this thing is going to try to retest, just to guess. A couple other names. Align looks pretty good. That name popped above value. Again, very high price stock, 375. I think call spreads, personally, again, this video is just for information purposes only, but I would be looking at that via call spreads. IDXX is another name that's starting to look interesting. So again, green candles after a series of red, right? And this happens from time to time. Once they start to reverse, they're all in uptrends. None of them have really broken any key support for some, like ALGN. A few other names, and then I'm starting to get into today's option activity, but a lot of names. You can see I've got a lot of names written down, this is a lot more than what we've seen in probably the last week. People really started to kind of come in and play some of these names, but if you look at DXCM, I think this is a healthcare equipment company, but nice call spread bought in this one. They bought the October, I think it was 145, 165 call spread. So, this is, I would call it very speculative considering on how far it's gone. But I think a call spread an excellent way to play it. If you look at, there's another one in here that looked pretty interesting. By the way, RMD is another one in this space, which I think also looks like it wants to just continue to go higher and grind higher. RPD was the name I was going to bring up, which I get these symbols confused. But Rapid 7 saw some calls. Nice tests at the top of value and bounce. So it seems like some of these really high demand names, saw that. I think with the internet group, it's just taking a little bit longer. Those popular names, of course, like Amazon, which I could look at those charts too. But I just wanted to get through, where I see some opportunities and maybe some smaller cap names. VKTX. Viking Therapeutics, also hammer bar on the 50-day moving average. This is an $11 stock. So I think also looks interesting. Maybe give it one more day. If you like that name, and if you're okay with playing a name around $10. Just to go over a few other names. Zscaler saw some calls go up today. Box saw a little bit. UPS, so the transports, which I touched upon already, you can see the IYT made a 52-week high. That's pretty bullish, right? So again, I think if you just give things time, I think if the international markets heal a little bit, you're going to see some nice price action. I don't think the transports by accident make a 52-week high, and that's not bearish to me. So that's a really nice move in the transports. And again, a lot of Dow theorists like to confirm that the industrials and the transports confirm one another. There's a lot of names in here that I don't think you could call out and say that they are hurricane names that are in the transports that are moving higher. The airlines did pretty well today, truckers, and the rails, of course, did pretty well. Qualcomm, we've seen calls in Qualcomm go up like I would say 4 out of the last 5 days. Very strong. I'm getting close to 15 minutes in the video, so I'm going to cut it here and not go through all these charts, but INFN, which is a pretty ugly looking name. A lot of calls going up in this one today. Lennar saw some calls going up as well towards the end of the day. I tried this for a day trade. It didn't really work. ATVI saw nice calls. These took off pretty well today. So this is another name. You know, it stalled out at the 50-day moving average about a week and a half ago. We'll see if this one can power through. Notice you have that VPOC up here. Just shy of 79, I guess about 78 and a half. That's a nice place to set up a target. So first things first, I would say make sure it gets above the 50-day moving average and goes from there. CMG was another name. Chipotle. Chipotle looks pretty good too. I think Hedgeye came out and said that they like this name, and a positive note on it. So I could keep going for about another 5 minutes. Like I said, there's a lot of names in here. Pivotal, which reports later in the week. KNX, this is another transportation name. Saw some calls as well. But you could see we're stacked up here, and I could spend another 5 or 10 minutes to go through some of these names. But, you know, I think overall a lot of risk taking and people actually buying the dip in some growth names today. All right, guys. So that's it for today's recap. Have a great night. See you tomorrow.